Sleeping Dogs released back in August 2012, and it was released for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC. Published by Square Enix and developed by United Front Games, who at the time wasn't a huge developer and didn't really have a name for themselves in the gaming industry, Sleeping Dogs was their first big title that they planned to captivate thousands of gamers with on their take on the open world third-person action game formula. However, the road towards getting Sleeping Dogs was a very long and bumpy one, and at one point, it wasn't going to be happening at all. Originally, Sleeping Dogs was being developed by Luxo Flux Games, the same people who made True Crime Streets of LA and True Crime Streets of New York. In fact, Sleeping Dogs wasn't even called Sleeping Dogs when it was being developed by Luxo Flux Games, and instead was titled True Crime Hong Kong. The original True Crime games released to mixed reviews and didn't perform as well as to what publisher at the time, Activision, would have wanted. So after the release of True Crime Streets of New York, Activision made the decision to put the series on hold. That was only until a few years later, when they approached United Front Games for them to produce the next entry in the True Crime series, True Crime Hong Kong. Again, United Front Games at the time wasn't a big game developer, but the studio was passionate about the project and wanted to make one of the best open world third-person action games that challenged the Grand Theft Auto series in their own way. During development, United Front Games released trailers of True Crime Hong Kong to excite players about the next entry in the True Crime series. Unfortunately, the trailers were once again met by the same mixed reviews the original True Crime series received, so the developers spent more time and more of the budget in making the necessary improvements from the feedback they had received. Sadly though, Activision didn't like this and decided to pull the plug on True Crime Hong Kong and cancel it. The game was dead in the water and wasn't happening at all. That was only until Square Enix acquired the rights to True Crime Hong Kong and revived the project, allowing United Front Games to continue development. The developers were given as much time as they needed to make the game they wanted to make, and boy, did they not let us down. Under new publishers Square Enix, the name of True Crime Hong Kong was changed to what we now know as Sleeping Dogs, to sever all ties and connections to the True Crime series. Sleeping Dogs released and received mostly positive reviews from the community and media outlets for its unique and interesting take on the open world third-person action game. In the coming months and years, the game received a large number of updates and 3 main DLCs to expand the single-player experience, which was all positively received. Then, in October 2014, Square Enix released Sleeping Dogs The Definitive Edition, a reworked, rebuilt, and remastered version of the game for the new generation of consoles, which at the time was the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and PC. 11 years later, and people still actively talk about how amazing and phenomenal Sleeping Dogs is compared to other games currently out there and those that have been released in the last 5 years. I first played Sleeping Dogs in 2018, shortly after the release of Red Dead Redemption 2, because I was craving another open world third-person action game, and when I first played Sleeping Dogs, I didn't like the game. I got to the 3rd or 4th mission and just gave up and uninstalled the game. Then in the following year, 2019, I decided to give it another shot and thought I'd progress through the game more before deciding if I liked it or not. I got past the 4th mission again and progressed through the main story some more, and then instantly fell in love with this game. Later on, I 100% completed the game and unlocked all trophies that the main game and DLCs had to offer. And yes, I have eaten 8 pork buns during my entire playtime of Sleeping Dogs, because a man who never eats pork buns is never a whole man. So recently I had the need to replay this game again on PC and look to once again 100% complete Sleeping Dogs. So with this video, I wanted to talk about how is Sleeping Dogs in 2024 and is it worth playing? So let's get into it. For those of you who have not played Sleeping Dogs takes place in Hong Kong, and you take control of our protagonist and one of the best of all time, in my opinion, Wei Shen. The game starts off during a stormy night at the Hong Kong harbour. We hear Cantonese police radio chatter overlapping the treacherous sounds of the rain, while the camera slowly pans across the harbour and gives us a brief look at Hong Kong. We then get to see 2 police officers in a surveillance van monitoring live footage of a drug deal happening at the harbour. Within the very first minute, this game's introduction is executed to perfection with only 2 shots, setting the dark underbelly but mysterious tone of the game and giving the player a hint of what they will be experiencing in the coming hours. Then, the first clear character we see is our main protagonist, Wei Shen, with his accomplice, Naz, walking towards a large male who they'll be selling drugs to at the harbour. Wei and Naz approach the large chap and greet him, then proceed to show him the drugs in exchange for the money. Unfortunately though, this is a video game and drug deals in video games never go according to plan. I mean, just look at the entire storyline of Grand Theft Auto Vice City for reference.
No, Sonny, I don't have the money.
That was my money, Tommy!
While the drug deal is going down, there is a security officer who is patrolling the harbour and witnesses the act. The security officer approaches the drug deal and the large chap acts out and cuts down the security officer with a meat cleaver. During the midst of this happening, the police officers watching the drug deal from the surveillance van call in immediate backup. Wei and Naz hear the police sirens and make a run for it with the money and are being chased by the Hong Kong Police Department. This is where the cutscene transitions into gameplay and the player first takes control of Wei Shen, as they have to help Wei escape the police and navigate our protagonist through the bustling and lively Hong Kong harbour. The player has to duck and dive through a fish processing yard and backroom gambling dens. Wei reaches a dead end and is cornered by a mass number of Hong Kong police officers, then is arrested. This is Sleeping Dogs. Now, I know that sounded like a long-winded explanation to the introduction to this game, but it honestly is one of the best introductions to any video game I have ever played. From the opening shot of Hong Kong to the tension it creates in the opening minute is incredible. Then following through to throw the player in the heat of the moment and giving them the task to escape a large unit of police officers is how you start a game with a bang. Then to finalize this climatic introduction, Wei Shen is arrested and the player is wondering what is going to happen next. We cut to an overcrowded prison cell where Wei is sat on a bench before he's greeted by a childhood friend, Jackie Ma, a member of one of the triad organizations that occupy Hong Kong, the Sun On Yee. From their brief interaction, we learn that Wei has been living in the United States for the last 15 years and only recently came back home to Hong Kong. Wei asks Jackie if there's ever work going with the gang he runs with that he would be happy to help, which Jackie is ecstatic about. Wei is then called into an interrogation room where it is revealed that he is an undercover police officer tasked with infiltrating and bringing down the Sun On Yee. During the discussion with Wei, Superintendent Pendrew, and his handler Raymond, who are supporting him with his operation, we find out Wei is an experienced undercover officer and has done this before in the States, and he's confident about this assignment since he grew up with some of the members in the Sun On Yee, so he knows who they are and what they are. Wei is then released onto the streets of Hong Kong to proceed with his undercover operation, where he meets up with Jackie Ma, who then introduces him to the leader of the Water Street branch of the Sun On Yee, Winston Chu. From Wei meeting Winston, we become aware that Wei has a personal vendetta, which is one of the reasons he accepted this assignment and moved back to Hong Kong, and that is to get revenge against Dog Eyes, another member of the Sun On Yee who was responsible for influencing Wei's sister's drug addiction, which led to her unfortunate death. After meeting Winston, Wei joins the gang and is sent on various jobs and assignments to gain control of the district, which is currently being dominated by a rival Sun On Yee branch, the Jade Gang, which so happens to be led by Dog Eyes. The start missions consist of the player having to perform low-level tasks to gain the trust of Winston, such as extorting money from different stands throughout the heavily packed crowds of Hong Kong's night market, hijacking shipments of fake watches, and taking over the popular minibus racket from their rivals, the Jade Gang. Most of these missions introduce you to the controls and combat, where you have to beat down enemies from the Jade Gang. Long story short, Wei ends up back in police custody and then starts working with Inspector Teng to take down more of the wanted criminals that are causing trouble through Hong Kong. while still remaining undercover. At this point in the story, Wei is proceeding to do jobs for both the Hong Kong Police Department and the Sun On Yee, and trying to keep the balance between these two forces. Eventually, Wei gains the trust from Winston and starts to rise through the ranks of the Sun On Yee, and this is when Wei starts to have a little bit of trouble with what force he is more loyal to. I won't go into what happens with the rest of the story, but it truly is one of my favorites from a video game because of its interesting concept of seeing the player torn between these two major forces and then seeing where the story eventually ends up. Some of my favorite stories from video games are the likes of Red Dead Redemption 2, Grand Theft Auto 4, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, Yakuza Like a Dragon, and the story of Sleeping Dogs sits up there in the top 5 spot with these legendary titles. All of the characters, even side characters that you meet throughout the story, are all memorable and distinctive in their own unique way, which is backed up by some sheer fantastic voice acting, especially from Wei Shen's voice actor, Will Yun Lee, who does a great job at capturing the confidence and anger that encapsulates our protagonist. Because of the masterful storytelling and unique characters, you end up caring about these characters, which is something that most games have difficulty with nowadays. Although everything that this game has to offer is amazing, the story is what makes this title shine and will stick with you long after completing the game. The story missions themselves are all exciting and thrilling, which majority of them primarily consists of Wei having to take down large crowds of enemies with his fists and weapons, and in some cases, pistols and rifles. However, although I say this, the game avoids repetitive gameplay and does add new mechanics to missions the more you advance through the story. One of the missions early on in the story tasks Wei with infiltrating his gang's hideout and plant a bug in the vent so the police can monitor their conversations. Wei can't be seen planting this bug, so instead, he decides to enter the hideout by climbing a construction site nearby and parkours across buildings to enter the hideout through its skylight. Wei enters the hideout and only has a couple of minutes to plant the bug, and to do so, he has to unscrew the vent, calibrate the bug, and then screw the vent back on. The player has to do all of this by unscrewing and screwing the vent back on and calibrating the bug with find the right frequency using the analog sticks. There are other missions which focus around police work, where one Wei has to dress in a disguise and take photographic evidence of a drug deal happening. Wei heads to where the drug deal is happening, and you have to fast talk your way past enemies to get closer to the deal. And the closer you get, the more careful you have to be. Then there is a mission where you have to help organize a wedding and drive the bride to have her wedding dress fitted, then make sure you get the cake and special flowers for the big day. It's really confusing, this mission, because the bride says she has all these friends, but it's Wei doing all of the special preparations with her. So the game isn't necessarily a constant beat 'em up, and it does plenty of other things to make sure that each story mission is fresh and exciting. In addition to this, I am a huge fan of how the story missions are structured. You begin the game as a low-level thug working for Winston's gang, but as you progress through the game's story, Wei rises through the ranks of the Sun On Yee and is given more violent missions, where in some you have to use pistols or rifles, and the stakes become much higher. Outside of the story missions, Sleeping Dogs offers a whole host of exciting activities and mini-games in the open world to ensure that the player enjoys their stay in Hong Kong. Wei can explore Hong Kong and participate in karaoke, street racing, street fighting, gambling, cockfighting, yeah, I know what you're thinking, martial art classes, drug busts, being able to go on dates, and so much more. There are favors scattered around Hong Kong where Wei can find people who are in need of his help with some basic tasks. One of which Wei helps a woman whose car has broken down, but then soon realizes it's a setup and then has his wallet stolen. Wei has to chase after the thief and get his wallet back. All of these favors that Wei can complete in the world helps increase his face level, which unlocks gameplay perks and clothing from stores which require a high face level. Speaking of face level, there are other upgrades the player can unlock for Wei, which can be new combat moves or gameplay perks, and these can be progressed depending on what faction you help more. So if you decide to do some police work, you will progress your level through the police upgrades, and the same goes for triad work. Some of these upgrades that you can unlock vary from being able to unlock a car valet who can bring you your vehicle anywhere in the world, from being able to unlock any police car trunk and obtaining a firearm from them. This game's world feels truly alive, and United Front Games have done a really good job at executing that feeling. During the day, Hong Kong feels like any other city, but during the night, the world is soaked in bright neon lights, which heighten how alive this game feels. You can explore the world and come across waiters working in restaurants, dock workers going about their business, people enjoying the nightlife at the Bam Bam Club, the night market packed with customers, and so much more. Being able to explore Hong Kong is very refreshing because there aren't many open world games that I know of which have tackled this setting. The map itself doesn't look that big, and some may say it looks rather small, but the world feels huge when you are exploring since there are so many back alleys, rooftops and interiors that you can explore. So in the grand scheme of things, it's actually huge with how layered it is. The map is separated into 4 districts, which are North Point, Central, Kennedy Town and Aberdeen, which are all connected via the highway. Each district has its own unique look and feel. So when you are exploring Hong Kong, it's easy for you to look around your current area and identify where you are in the world without having to look at your map. Now let's discuss the gameplay. Sleeping Dogs is a third-person open-world action-adventure game, so most people compare it to the Grand Theft Auto series because you can explore the world, steal cars, fight anyone you like, progress the story by going to the missions dotted across the world, and pretty much do whatever you want. However, Sleeping Dogs has a unique approach to this genre and adds a whole new host of exciting gameplay to make sure it's different from the rest. The combat in this game is one of the best combat systems I have ever experienced in a video game, and it's extremely satisfying. People say it's similar to the Arkham games because in both the Arkham games and Sleeping Dogs, the player is surrounded by a bunch of enemies and you have to take them down one by one, while also countering incoming attacks. I disagree with this comparison and I'll explain why. Most of the combat centers around performing martial art techniques against your enemies in hand-to-hand brawls, but you can also use your environment to your advantage, perform executions which really set Sleeping Dogs apart from any other open world game. For example, when you're fighting enemies, you can grab them and throw them into one of the red highlighted environmental items in the area to perform an execution, and most of them are pretty brutal. Just to name a few, you can throw people into vents, circuit boards, telephone booths, furnaces, and a fish tank to take them down. Even better, after throwing this poor lad into a fish tank, you can pick up one of the fish that has come from the shattered tank and use that fish to beat up his mates with, which is unreal. There are a lot more brutal executions than the ones I have just mentioned, but I will leave that as a surprise for those of you who have not played the game and plan to. Wei Shen's fighting style was actually influenced by UFC legend Georges St. Pierre, who helped United Front Games ensure that the combat felt authentic as possible to the real thing. So one of GSP's moves, which is the flying punch, was given to Wei Shen as a combat move he can perform, which I think just shows you how dedicated the developers were to their craft to make sure that the combat was the best it could be. The combat will also have enemies attack you with pipes, knives, or meat cleavers, and Wei can disarm them and use their weapons against them for a short time before they break. As mentioned previously, the more you progress through the story, the more violent missions become, and there are some which give Wei a pistol or rifle to take down his enemies with. I will admit this game doesn't have the best shooting mechanics and it can feel very arcadey at times, but there aren't a lot of these missions in comparison to the hand-to-hand combat missions. Again, as mentioned before, Wei can visit martial arts schools and unlock new techniques where you can introduce new combat moves to take down your enemies much easier with during fights. There's so much variety and fluidity to the combat in Sleeping Dogs that make it absolutely perfect and exciting from start to finish. Overall, the combat makes you feel like you're John Wick. To grab the wheel and to talk about driving now, with Sleeping Dogs being an open world game, most of your methods of travel from A to B are using a vehicle, and the driving in this game isn't spectacular, but it is solid. The feel of driving in this game can feel arcadey at times, but it does fit the same style and concept of how the rest of the game feels, so it isn't out of place whatsoever. A super cool feature to driving is that when you're in a car or on a bike, you can hijack other vehicles by jumping from your current vehicle and onto that one, which is pretty awesome. So if you're driving around the world and you see a car you really like, don't worry about having to pull them over and then to hijack them, because in Sleeping Dogs, you can just do it from the vehicle you are currently driving. I also need to add here that the radio stations in this game are all great, with each station offering different genres of music to accommodate different players' tastes in music. You can purchase vehicles and use them to drive around Hong Kong, or you can use them in the street racing scene. Additionally, you store any vehicles you purchase in your garage, where you can customize the color of them from there too. There is a ton of customization in this game, which I just mentioned about being able to purchase vehicles and customize the color of them, but you can also purchase a variety of clothes for Wei by visiting different shops in Hong Kong. What is really neat is that each shop sells different clothes, which influences the player to explore more of the world and visit different shops to see what they have for sale. The clothes vary from just generic basic clothing to suits, which make more sense for Wei to wear later on in the game's story. It's also cool that in the definitive edition, it adds a special clothes vendor in the night market. You've got special outfits such as being able to look like Agent 47 or Adam Jensen from the Deus Ex series, which gives the player a unique weapon.
I never asked for this.
There is even customization for your apartment too, where you can purchase new air conditioning, a new bed, or even a bed. I'm not sure what benefits that gives to Wei, but it's crazy that you can do this. For the game that was released in 2012, the customization in this game compared to others at the time was impressive. I think the only thing I don't like about the customization in Sleeping Dogs is that for certain clothing items, you need to be a certain face level, which I mentioned before. To raise your face level, you need to complete some of the favors offered by characters in Hong Kong. In a way, it's not so bad because the game influences you to experience more of what the game has to offer and rewards you by giving you new clothing to purchase. Then, given the world, it makes sense that by Wei helping more people throughout Hong Kong, he's become more known and is wearing more premium quality clothing to make him stand out from the rest. So is Sleeping Dogs worth playing in 2024? Absolutely 100% yes. I strongly believe this game is incredibly underrated and is not spoken about enough. Or as I mentioned at the start of this video, people have probably only played the first few missions and gave up and not given it a second chance. This game has one of the best stories I have ever experienced from a video game, while also providing the player with astonishing gameplay on top of that. So this game is definitely worth playing for the first time if you've not played it yet, or revisiting. This game does go on sale quite frequently and goes super cheap, and I've even seen the definitive edition go on sale for £4 at one point, which can be cheaper than a cup of coffee nowadays. At the moment, the most popular third-person open-world action game series is the Grand Theft Auto franchise, but I believe Sleeping Dogs is just as good as these games and offers more in some ways of its own. It would be incredible to see a sequel to Sleeping Dogs in the future at some point, because they could just build upon the foundation they set with the game we have now and make the sequel 10 times better, I would hope. Sleeping Dogs has so much potential to be its own franchise and challenge the Grand Theft Auto series, because I don't think many other games do that at the moment. I think if we did get a sequel, I do think it should still be set in Hong Kong, but making the map bigger, or maybe adding another island which is fully detailed with explorable roads, buildings, shops, which would make more sense. I think it would be cool if the story followed the same premises as the first game, where you're an undercover police officer, but this time you're a new protagonist and Wei Shen is still in Hong Kong. And the story is about you investigating the events of what happened to him after the first game, and the story goes from there. So hopefully, after seeing this video, you decide to pick up Sleeping Dogs for the first time, or revisit it. If you do, please drop the video a like rating. If you have played this game before, or if you think this game deserves a sequel, please let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I had a lot of fun making this video, and I had a blast replaying through Sleeping Dogs and making notes of everything I enjoyed about this game, so I could share this with you guys, because I do believe this game is a true masterpiece. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.